Against the backdrop of escalating violence in Gaza, French President Emmanuel Macron and Egyptian President Abdel Fattah el-Sisi made a striking visit to Al Arish Hospital, spotlighting the dire humanitarian plight of injured Palestinians. This symbolic gesture underscores growing international alarm over Israel's intensified military actions following the collapse of a fragile ceasefire. Amidst multi-billion euro deals on green hydrogen and cultural cooperation, Macron's mission seeks to fortify European solidarity with Arab causes while navigating US-European rifts. Will this bold diplomacy reshape global perspectives on Gaza's crisis? And how might renewed calls for an immediate ceasefire influence international support for reconstruction? Welcome to Think Tank. Al-Ahram Online has reported that thousands of Egyptians rallied in Arish against US-Israeli plans to displace Palestinians, coinciding with President el-Sisi and French President Macron's visit. The protests highlighted Egypt's solidarity with Palestinians, tying Middle East stability to resolving their plight. Macron opposed displacement and annexation, denouncing anti-Palestinian schemes. During his historic North Sinai visit, he toured aid hubs like Egyptian Red Crescent warehouses and Al Arish Hospital, where over 1,500 injured Palestinians have been treated. Egypt emphasized Arish Airport as a lifeline for Gaza amid blockades. France's backing of Cairo underscores joint efforts to address the crisis, including earlier naval missions aiding Gazans. This collaboration amplifies calls to end the blockade and protect Palestinian rights. Amid rising Middle East tensions, French President Emmanuel Macron's visit to Egypt marks a pivotal moment. Can Europe rise above US influence to reshape the Gaza crisis and champion global peace?
French President Emmanuel Macron's recent visit to Egypt, culminating in a tripartite summit with Egyptian President Abdel Fattah el-Sisi and Jordanian King Abdullah II, underscores Europe's growing role amid escalating tensions over Gaza. As Israel intensifies its military campaigns following the collapse of a fragile ceasefire, Macron's solidarity with Palestinians signals an evolving European stance on the crisis, shaped significantly by the transatlantic rift under US President Donald Trump. Macron emphasized the necessity of returning to a ceasefire agreement during his press conference with el-Sisi, aligning France firmly with Arab calls for international intervention. This move reflects broader European frustration with Washington's unilateral approach under Trump, which prioritized Israel without addressing Palestinian grievances. Since then, the EU has sought to recalibrate its Middle East policy, bolstered by Macron's leadership, advocating for humanitarian aid and reconstruction efforts in Gaza, while urging global powers to push for peace. The US-European divide deepens, as Europe increasingly perceives itself as a counterbalance to American policies perceived as destabilizing. Macron's diplomatic engagement with Cairo highlights this shift, offering renewed momentum for Palestinian causes with European institutions. By fostering stronger ties with Egypt as a key regional mediator, France positions itself as a credible interlocutor, bridging Western and Arab perspectives. Ultimately, Macron's visit could galvanize European unity on Gaza, countering US influence and reinforcing multilateralism. However, Whether this newfound resolve translates into tangible support remains contingent upon sustained coordination among EU member states and their willingness to challenge entrenched geopolitical dynamics.
Providing more analysis about the most recent updates concerning this important and special visit, historical one, of the French President Macron to Egypt and its implications, joining us from Cairo, Dr. Nourhani Sheikh, political science professor, and from Paris, Meher Nicholas Firzil, World Bank former advisor and director of Washington Forum. A very warm welcome to Think Tank to both our fellow guests.
Delighted to join you today. I would say that Macron's stance is calculated, calibrated, and is belated. So it comes tardily, better late than never, but until recently, basically until last week, to be honest, in his first 7 years in office, President Macron had focused most of his time and energy on two regions of the world. The first one is the US, and the other one is Eastern Europe. And so really, if you count the number of meetings he's held with foreign dignitaries, the numbers of trips where he went abroad, etc., America, Lithuania, Poland, Ukraine came first. And in many ways, Macron, not only Macron, but Macron and the French elite, more broadly, in the past 7 years or 10 years, they kind of neglected the Mediterranean and North Africa and the Middle East, with a small exception, and that being Lebanon. But Lebanon is not a very important, is no longer an important country. So with the single exception of perhaps Lebanon, France has, or gave the impression to the French elite, French foreign ministry, Macron himself, gave the impression of abandoning to a large extent the Mediterranean, Middle East, and North Africa to focus on America and Eastern Europe. Now, what happened last week was a shock, because when Trump declared war upon his allies and friends, unlike the Canadians and the Mexicans were expecting it, kind of, or the Chinese were very much expecting it, the European Union was taken by surprise. And they viewed it as a shocking, news. And so for the past 6-7 days, they have tried to reassess their place in the world. And I think Macron's trip to Cairo, Alexandria, and Al Arish comes in that broader context of, Europe, France rediscovering the importance of the Mediterranean, North Africa, and the Middle East. And of course, for geo-economic reasons, Egypt is very much at the heart of the Arab world, at the heart of the Middle East and North Africa. So for all these reasons, I think, Macron rushed, in a way, to travel to Cairo to try to revive that part of France's national interest, which he himself had neglected for a long time. And there is the issue of the Gaza Strip and the West Bank, which is a festering wound. If you look at the map, the West Bank and Gaza are a festering wound at the heart of the Arab world. And that wound is getting, worse and worse and worse. It's leaking. It's destabilizing the whole region in a way. And that's why we have, the king of Jordan, who flew to Cairo to meet President Sisi and President Macron, because the issue is broader than just Gaza Strip and the West Bank. And France is trying somehow to fill the gap. What do I mean by fill the gap? In strategic thinking, there's a saying which goes back to Greece, ancient Greece: nature hates emptiness. Nature abhors
Nature hates
the void.
emptiness?
Yeah, so when there is a void, when something is empty, nature doesn't like it, and so there is a pressure for a replacement to fill the gap, fill the emptiness. What does it mean? It means when Trump came into office 3 months ago, he gave the impression that America was no longer a neutral, honest broker, and he's perceived in the Middle East and North Africa as being pro-Likud or pro-Netanyahu. And the statements that came from the White House about Gaza, turning Gaza into a Riviera with casinos and gambling tables, blah, 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 all that, and deporting, half or 2/3 of the population, all that was a big shock to the people and the governments of the Middle East and North Africa. And I think, that's why, the equilibrium was broken. And because the equilibrium was broken, it creates an opportunity in a way for Europe and France to fill the gap, say, okay, America is no longer perceived as an honest broker in the Middle East because it's viewed as being pro-Israeli or pro-Netanyahu. Maybe we, the French or the European, we can step in and fill the void, fill the gap. So I think all that is part of President Macron's calculation.
Sir, do you think that this visit, Macron's visit to Cairo, and the trilateral summit that took place yesterday is pressures US President Donald Trump at this point, or it wouldn't make any difference from your own point of view and perspective? And is Macron trying to send a message to the United States and the President of the United States that there are other partners that will stand for Gaza and the European Union? And what do you think, sir?
Yes, indeed. It's about signaling, sending a signal, because, geopolitics is also theater or theatrics. So that's why when Macron went to Al Arish is really the border between southwestern Palestine and northeastern Egypt, right? So it is, a stone throw from the refugee camps in Gaza. By going physically to Al Arish, Macron was trying to send a signal to both President Trump and Prime Minister Netanyahu. Will they listen to his signal? That's another story. Why? So why is it another story? It's once again balance. In geopolitics, balance owes to a large extent to the thinking of a French philosopher called Montesquieu, right? So equilibrium, balance. The balance seems to be broken. Macron and Europe, they're trying to create a new balance, and so they're telling Saudi Arabia, Egypt, Jordan, we will help you. We will help the Palestinian cause, and we are going to reestablish a new balance, blah, blah, blah.
Got your point, sir. I'll leave it there and be back to you again. Dr. Sheikh, with Egypt positioning itself as a mediator, what role can Cairo play in bridging Arab demands for a ceasefire with international diplomatic efforts?
Actually, Egypt is the one who is responsible for what is going on. It is not just a mediator. It is the one who in charge of all political and diplomatic process is going on. Egypt has done a lot along the last period to reach the ceasefire agreement. And the most important in Egypt mediation, that it propose initiative which is matching all parts' interests, because Egypt deeply understand what is going on in Gaza, deeply understand the interests of different parts, and it is also defending that much the rights of Palestinians. So all parts, Israeli, Palestinians, and all parts accepting the mediation of Egypt, because it's usually introducing a fair proposals, a fair initiatives. But we all know that Israeli doesn't like from time to time that fairness in mediation, and that's why from time to time it putting some obstacles against the negotiation. But by the end, what we reached, the ceasefire agreement, and the first phase, which was successful by all evaluation. I think Egypt did a lot in it, and the one who handled it actually the first phase and the agreement as a whole. And we are now trying to push forward the negotiation for the second phase. Plus convince Israel and the United States for the reconstruction plan, which is very, I think, a very great plan, would guarantee peace and stability, not only in Palestine, but the whole region.
Dr. Sheikh, if you, of course, commenting on what you just said now, the impact of the trilateral summit that took place in Cairo yesterday, which coincides with the meeting, of course, with the visit of Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu to Washington, of course, in discussions and negotiations with U.S. President Donald Trump. What will the impact of this trilateral summit be on the negotiations that took place, which coincided at the same time?
I think it has a very positive impact. The phone call from President Macron, President Sisi, as well as King Abdullah, I think with a very strong message. And we all follow what happened during that meeting between President Trump and Netanyahu. As far as I remember, that President Trump mentioned clearly that he wants that war to come to an end, and he is expecting it that it will end. And he said that his team, it means his administration, by way or another, is preparing a new plan or a new proposal for ceasefire and for Gaza. I think that that is a very important
Do you think
shift.
his narrative is changing, Donald Trump, after what happened in Cairo yesterday?
Not to be realistic, it will not be 100%. I mean, he didn't mention his displacement plan, and I think that he's still stuck with his displacement plan. But to push forward towards ceasefire, I think this is very positive step and positive sign, and that a very important result and impact from yesterday's summit, because President Macron, by way or another, yes, he representing France and representing himself, but he is also representing EU, as there is no new government in Berlin and Britain Brexit. So the European Troika, now it is France. So France is the leading power within the EU and the one who is speaking on behalf in the EU in all matters, by the way. If we are following what is going in Ukraine, also France taking the leading role. So I think what happened yesterday has very positive impact, and the feedback from President Trump was very clear. And I think that some Israeli newspaper describe the meeting of Netanyahu and Trump as the worst between the two.
As the worst?
Worst, yes. Worst
As the worst between both leaders.
Both, yes. And they canceled the common press conference, which usually took place after summits. So I think it may, yes, maybe it's not related only to Gaza. We had tariffs, we had
Iran, we had many topics.
Yes.
Dr. Sheikh, I'll leave you here and I'll be back again. Mr. Ferzilli, what implications does the United States European rift under Trump's policies have on Europe's ability to independently address the Gaza crisis and support Palestinian rights?
So first, Europe is divided when it comes to the Middle East and Gaza and the issue of Palestine. To make a long story short, half of Europe is slightly, very slightly pro-Palestinian, like Macron. A third, so when I say half pro-Palestinian, there are shades, right? So Macron is amongst the moderates, and in that half, there are people who are even more firmly on the side of Palestine or the Palestinian cause, and that would be countries like Italy, Spain, Portugal, Ireland, Norway, so Belgium. These countries, they are very, very pro-Palestinian, even more than France. France is slightly on the side of the Palestinian cause. Maybe now, with Macron's visit
Which
to Al
country
Arish,
is slightly, sir? Sorry, I didn't hear you. I beg your pardon.
France. So France is in the same group as Italy, Spain, Portugal, etc., but it's less strongly pro-Palestinian. And then another half of EU member states who are very much pro-Israeli, right? And these would be typically the Eastern European, Northern European, Scandinavian countries. Many of the governments in Central, Eastern, and Northern Europe are actually very sympathetic and very close, not only to Israel in general, but they're very much close to the right wing of the Likud party, and they think that Prime Minister Netanyahu is doing a great job, right? And Germany, because of its past, is a particular case. But what I'm coming at is that Europe is divided because Europe is half, quote unquote, pro-Israeli, half pro-Palestinian, and within both halves, you have shades and nuances. But because Europe is divided, it will not be able, I think, to act decisively. And that's why action
Don't you think, sir, that there could be now, after what's taking place on the global region, don't you think that the division will be less, and there are countries that are going to be against Israel for the sake of the Palestinian cause and for the sake of the atrocities and genocides? And this is the, of course, opinion not only of citizens and normal people, but the opinion of course, the international community and the global community and every single organization.
Yes, it's already, like I said, it's already the opinion of the governments and the people of Italy, Spain, Portugal, Ireland, Norway, Belgium, right? So half of Europe is on that wavelength. The other half is not. So what I'm coming at, action, pro-Palestinian action, will happen at national level. So countries like France, for example, they will take decisive action. I think it will be mostly at national, at country level, but these are important countries. So Italy, Spain, France.
So, sir, where do you think they're going? Do you think the division will be, what will happen?
So what will happen is the following. So following what happened last week, which is the declaration of commercial war by the White House to the European Union, many in Europe, they feel betrayed, right? Because they feel betrayed, they're trying to reassess and perhaps rejig their foreign policy.
So you think, sir, that point of views are going to get closer?
So some of them, many of them, want to get closer to the Mediterranean, the Arab world, North Africa, and the Middle East. And so they're moving in that direction slowly, but I don't think they're going to challenge America in that theater. So the Middle East being a theater where big powers operate.
Because I have to wrap up this episode right now, so you think they're going to get closer? That was Dr. Nourhan Sheikh, a political science professor, and Meher Nicholas Ferzili, World Bank former advisor and director of Washington Forum. Thank you very much for both your special, of course, and valuable insights and informative knowledge. From Paris to Al Arish, can Macron's diplomacy initiative redefine global solidarity with Gaza? The answers lie in unity, action, and resolve. That brings us to the end of today's episode of Think Tank, which always unveils the complexities of our changing world. I'm Rana Khassas, and I thank you very much for watching.